Horizon Forbidden West feels smooth when you play it, but if you turn on the frame time graph, it tells a different story. The question is, does that actually matter? In this video, I'll show real benchmarks at 1080p, 1440p and 4K and explain which performance issues are real and which ones you'll never feel while playing. Let's start with the raw data. This is 1080p native high settings, DLAA enabled. Performance remains in the mid 80s with high wattage around 100 watts and 97 to 99% GPU usage during traversal. But once during low altitude flying, FPS suddenly dropped into the 40s and even reached the 30s. Notice something important, GPU power drops at the same time. The GPU doesn't render frames on its own. The game has to prepare each frame first. That includes loading terrains, textures, and deciding what needs to be drawn next. When you're flying low and fast, the game has to load a lot of new world data very quickly. For a moment, the game couldn't prepare the next frame fast enough, so the GPU had nothing to work on. That's why power dropped. This happened once, it's rare, but it shows how the engine behaves under extreme traversal. During combat, the frame rate remains in the low 70s. Now keep an eye on the frame time graph, look how jittery it is. Switching to DLSS Quality, let's see how much of a bump we get. With DLSS Quality, FPS jumps above 100 and power stays stable. And now look at the frame time graphs again, they are much less jittery. DLSS lowers the internal resolution the game renders at. That reduces how much work the engine has to do per frame. DLSS here isn't just about FPS. It gives the engine more breathing room. That doesn't mean DLSS fixes every game. It helps most in games that struggle during fast traversal and streaming. At 1440p, the performance settles into the mid 50s to 80s depending on settings and locations. You can see small frame time movements or jitters on the graph, especially when flying low or during combat, but you will not feel this while playing. Flying adds load and so does combat. In normal gameplay, this feels smooth. 1440p native with high settings and DLAA enabled, the FPS remains around mid 50s to low 60s. The game occupies around 7 GB of VRAM and GPU utilization stays in the high 90s. Switching to DLSS Quality at 1440p, high settings, FPS mostly sits in the mid 80s. Both CPU and GPU temps are also in the 80s, which is expected owing to the environmental effects, and it's still within normal operating limits. We'll see if that changes later. Frame delivery remains smooth and nothing here feels unstable during regular traversal. To stress things a bit more, let's look at a combat at 1440p, including a Thunderjaw fight. Even here, performance stays in the same general range with no sudden spikes or drops. This is where consistency matters more than peak FPS, and it holds up well. With that baseline established at 1440p, let's move up to 4K and see how far this laptop can realistically be pushed. At 4K with DLSS balanced, FPS stays mostly in the high 50s to low 60s. Memory usage is high, but gameplay remains smooth. Analytically imperfect, practically smooth with VRR. With dynamic resolution turned on, this lines up closely with the console 40 FPS experience. I tested all the settings again with NVIDIA Reflex completely off. The behavior stays the same. This isn't a driver or latency feature, it's how the engine behaves. Horizon Forbidden West doesn't stutter in a way that ruins gameplay. What you're seeing on graphs is how modern engines treat predictability to scale. 1080p is the fastest with a rare edge case anomaly. 1440p is the best balance. 4K is playable with the right expectation. And DLSS is a stability tool also. If you're playing this and it feels smooth, that's because it is. If this helped, like and subscribe. I do real benchmarks like this every week.